The lab was my sanctuary. It was the only place where logic was king. Late at night, the hum of the servers was a steady chorus. The only other sound was the low, mathematical beauty of Bach's cello suites playing from my desktop speakers. It was predictable. It was perfect. Each note followed the last in a pattern of flawless certainty. I ran a final diagnostic on Vitas Pods serial number 734. Its composite shell was cool and smooth under my fingertips. Inside, a cryogenic suspension held its temperature at a perfect minus 150 degrees Celsius. Not minus 149.9, not minus 150.1. Perfect. The pod was more than a container. It was a promise. A closed loop of thermal regulation, GPS tracking, and biometric security. I had written the first and last lines of its firmware. It was my life's work, distilled into a sleek, intelligent life support system. My legacy, my motivation was simple and absolute. The chain of custody for human biologics could not be compromised. Not ever. I took a sip of Lapsang Souchong tea. The smoky flavor was an acquired taste, much like me. The mug was a heavy ceramic thing, its handle slightly lopsided. A final gift from my mother. It was the only object in my minimalist office that was imperfect, and the only one that was irreplaceable. The next morning, I met the man who would try to replace me. Chase Caldwell was the new chief operating officer. He was a creature of the boardroom. His suit probably cost more than my first car. His hair had that expensive, deliberately casual look. He held a Mont Blanc pen like a scepter and used it to point at spreadsheets projected onto a wall. He never looked at the people in the room. He only looked at the numbers. He spoke a language I had never managed to learn. It was a dialect of corporate nonsense. Words like synergize, actionize, and paradigm shift were its primary vocabulary. He used them to obscure a simple, terrifying fact. He had no idea what he was doing. "We need to actionize a paradigm shift," he said, tapping a graph showing logistics costs. "We need to leverage a more fungible, low-friction solution." Fungible. He wanted to make the transport of a human heart as interchangeable as a shipment of paper towels. A senior logistician, a good man named Marcus, who had been with the company for 20 years, tried to explain the complexities. Chase waved a dismissive hand. "The data-driven reality is that the risk profile is minimal," Chase said. The phrase meant nothing. It was just noise he used to shut down conversation. His fatal flaw was on full display. He was a man drowning in data, but starved of understanding. He could only see short-term cost and gain. The rest was just inconvenient detail. The small insults started the next week. They were like 1,000 tiny paper cuts. He began referring to my research and development team as my science fair. The condescension in his voice was a physical thing. It made the air in the room feel thick. During a planning meeting, he asked if the Vitas Pods came in a cheaper color. He was not joking. The room went silent. I felt the eyes of my team on me. I explained that the color of the composite shell was determined by its thermal reflective properties, a key component in maintaining temperature stability during tarmac transfers in direct sunlight. He just blinked. "Right," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "Just give me the bottom line, Dr. Hallstrom." He always stretched out my title. It was not a sign of respect. It was a way to frame me as a stuffy academic, someone out of touch with the real world of profit and loss. He questioned everything: the custom avionics, the triple redundant power supplies, the biometric locks. He saw my pursuit of perfection as a personal failing. The end came in the third quarter budget review. The room was cold. The coffee was bitter. Chase stood at the head of the long, polished table. He clicked his pen. On the screen behind him, a single massive number appeared in bright red. It was the annual cost of my single-use integrity seals. "This," he announced, aiming a laser pointer at the number like a weapon, "is low-hanging fruit. It is waste." I kept my voice even. Chase, that waste is our legal and medical guarantee. It is the reason we have a perfect record of 0 failures and 0 liability. A reusable lock is a compromised lock. He turned to me. His smile did not reach his eyes. Lena, with all due respect, you are a brilliant engineer, but you do not see the big picture. Shareholder value is the big picture. We are moving to a standard multi-use digital lock. It is a 90% cost reduction. I could feel the blood drain from my face. That will destroy the chain of custody, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. We would be legally obligated to report every shipment as potentially compromised. He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. We will report efficiency. We will report savings. I have made my decision. I stood up. I had to. Some things cannot be negotiated. I will not sign off on it. I will not stake my name or my team's work on a system I know to be fundamentally flawed and dangerous. This was the moment. He saw my stand not as a defense of principle, but as an act of insubordination. He had been waiting for this. The predatory smile returned. It was wider this time. Then you are failing to understand your role here, he said. His voice was dangerously soft now. Your job is to implement, not to question. You are officially relieved of your duties for gross insubordination and for failing to act in the best interest of this company's shareholders. He fired me, in front of my peers, in front of the team I had built from the ground up. The humiliation was a physical shock, cold and sharp. As I stood there, stunned, he delivered the final twist of the knife. Maybe a university is a better place for you, he said, his voice laced with false sympathy. More theoretical, less bottom line. My exit was controlled. I went back to my office. The glass walls felt like a cage. People avoided my eyes. I did not cry. I did not rage. I felt a strange and terrible calm settle over me, a cold, clear focus. He thought he had won. He had no idea what he was really trying to steal. He thought he was just cutting costs on a fancy shipping container. He was dismantling a promise I had encoded in every line of its software. I packed a single cardboard box. I carefully wrapped my mother's chipped mug in bubble wrap. I took a worn paperback copy of Asimov's Foundation. It seemed appropriate. The story of an empire's collapse, foreseen by a single man of science. The rest I left behind. The awards, the technical manuals, the framed patents. They were just paper. The real system, the important part, was not something he could see or touch. I walked out of the Vita chain building without a backward glance. The automatic doors hissed shut behind me. It felt like a final, clean break. My apartment was a sanctuary of a different kind. Minimalist, orderly, a place where everything had a purpose. It was my external hard drive, a physical manifestation of my own mind. I made tea. I sat at my sleek, uncluttered desk, and I began my quiet move. There was an email waiting for me, an offer for a research fellowship at a prestigious medical university. I had been considering it for months, a chance to work on next-generation problems without the burden of quarterly reports. I typed my acceptance. It was a simple, declarative act, a step into a new life. What Chase did not understand was that my hidden ace was not a trap I needed to set. It was a truth I had already built into the very soul of the Vitas Pod. It was a fundamental law of its architecture. He was the one who had chosen to break that law. The consequences were not my design. They were his. I had built this system with one hidden feature, a feature I never mentioned to the marketing department or the board. I never imagined it would be necessary. I built it for myself, a final, absolute guarantee of integrity. The integrity seal was not just a lock. It was a cryptographic key that completed a circuit. With the seal in place, the pod operated in secure mode. It logged its data every second to an immutable blockchain ledger. a permanent, unerasable record of its journey. If that seal was bypassed, or if the internal temperature deviated by even 1/10 of a degree, the system's core programming would execute a single, irreversible command. It would brand the entire ledger for that shipment, a digital tombstone, chain of custody breach, contents void. It was not a warning. It was a final mathematical verdict. It rendered the contents medically useless and legally indefensible. Chase was now marching his entire company through a digital minefield. He was wearing hobnail boots. The final part of my preparation was the easiest. The Bach cello suites were playing. The orderly notes filled the quiet space of my apartment. I opened a web browser. I went to a news alert service. I typed in a single phrase, Vita chain. I set the alert to send me an email for any new mention. Then I took a slow sip of my smoky tea. A small, cold smile touched my lips. It was a moment of quiet satisfaction. The trap was not set. The trap had always been there. All I had to do now was wait. Months passed. The university was a relief. I was surrounded by people who spoke my language, the language of data, of evidence, of scientific rigor. I published a paper on cryogenic cell degradation. I began work on a theoretical model for a new type of thermal insulation. I did not think about Vita chain. I did not have to. I knew, with the same certainty as a law of physics, that it would come to me. The email alert arrived on a Tuesday morning. The subject line was bland. Vita chain announces record cost savings. I clicked the link. There was a picture of Chase Caldwell. He looked smug. His teeth were very white. He was quoted extensively in the press release. He spoke of aggressive optimization and a new era of efficiency. He proudly announced the massive savings from his new policies, including the cheap, reusable locks, and a new contract with a low-bid shipping company. I read the name of the company and felt a chill. They were known for cutting corners. They were the cheapest for a reason. He was not just saving money. He was sowing the seeds of his own disaster. I imagined the scene. I could almost see it unfold. A new driver, overworked and underpaid, rushing to make a delivery, a priceless shipment of custom-grown stem cells, a last hope for a billionaire's dying child. The details would be in the news later. The GPS rerouting him through an unexpected traffic jam on the interstate. The driver glancing nervously at the Vitas Pod in his truck. He would not understand the delicate science it contained. He would only see a box that needed to stay cold. He would have an idea, a terrible, ignorant idea, a way to help. He would pull over. He would use a simple tool to bypass the new, cheap lock. An act that would have been physically and cryptographically impossible with my single-use integrity seal. He would open the pod for just a moment, just long enough to toss in a bag of convenience store ice. The instant the pod was opened, the system would react. I knew the code by heart, a cascade of events executed in milliseconds. Internal sensors detect the catastrophic environmental shift. Temperature deviation exceeds threshold. External seal integrity bypassed. Core programming executes Failsafe protocol. I closed my eyes and pictured the stark text-based visualization of the logic gate. The command is executed. The immutable ledger for that shipment is permanently branded, chain of custody breach, contents void. The panic in Chase Caldwell's office must have been a beautiful thing to behold. I imagined him staring at his quarterly projections. The phone call would have come from the general counsel, voice tight with fear. The shipment was rejected at the hospital. The transplant was canceled. The billionaire, the one whose dying child had just lost their last chance, was not just angry. He was going to war. Chase's face would have drained of color. His expensive tan would have looked gray under the fluorescent lights. His first instinct would be to blame someone: the driver, the hospital, the shipping contractor. Anyone but himself. He would have demanded a system override. He would have shouted about actionizing a solution. A terrified IT technician, probably someone I had hired, would have delivered the final blow. The technician would have explained that the flag was not a simple error message. It was a permanent brand on a blockchain ledger. It was immutable. It was un-erasable. There was no override. There was no Control-Z'd. The look on his face when he realized he was not up against a disgruntled employee or a faulty machine. He was confronting a mathematical certainty, a truth he could not spin or delegate or synergize his way out of. He was trapped inside a perfect logical system that he had been too arrogant and too ignorant to understand. And that system was about to tear his world apart. Vita Chain was in a state of freefall. The lawsuit was a thing of brutal efficiency. The billionaire had hired the best corporate litigators in the country. They were not interested in a settlement. They were interested in annihilation. The press was having a field day. The story was too perfect. A heartless corporation cutting corners, a dying child, a catastrophic failure. The company's stock price plummeted. Investors were fleeing. The chaos was absolute. My summons arrived by courier, a thick, intimidating manila envelope. Inside, a subpoena from the plaintiff's legal team. They requested my services as their star expert witness. It was not a surprise. It was an invitation to the final act. The courtroom was frigid. The air was thick with tension. I saw Chase Caldwell sitting at the defendant's table. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He was sweating, despite the cold. He looked smaller than I remembered. Defeated. He would not meet my eyes. I took the stand. I felt a familiar sense of calm. This was just another system, a system of rules and procedures, a place where facts were supposed to matter. I was a picture of quiet competence. My voice was steady. My answers were precise. The billionaire's lead counsel, a sharp woman named Anya Sharma, guided me through my credentials, my doctorate, my patents, my publications, my role as the chief architect of the Vitas Pods system. Then she moved to the main event. "Dr. Hallstrom," she said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "could you explain to the court the purpose of the integrity seal you designed?" "It was a guarantee," I said simply, "a cryptographic and physical guarantee that the chain of custody had not been broken. It ensured that the contents of the pod were delivered in the exact state they were sent, perfect, untouched, viable." Sharma nodded. Then she gestured to a massive screen behind her. "Please direct your attention to the monitor. This is the official system ledger for the shipment in question, retrieved from Vita Chain's own servers. Can you tell the jury what they are looking at?" On the screen, a long scroll of data appeared. It was a sea of green text, timestamps, GPS coordinates, temperature readings, all perfect, all stable. Then at the very bottom, a single glaring line of red. I let the jury absorb it for a moment. Then I answered. "They are looking at the truth," I said. I ignored Anya Sharma. I ignored the judge and the jury. I looked directly at Chase Caldwell. He flinched, as if I had struck him. "It means the system worked exactly as it was designed," I continued, my voice even and clear. "It recorded a catastrophic failure in protocol. The green data points show a perfect journey. The red line shows the moment the unauthorized cheaper lock was bypassed and the pod was opened mid-route. The system detected the breach and, as it was programmed to do, it permanently voided the shipment's ledger to prevent the use of compromised medical material." Sharma then led me through a devastating series of questions. Each one was a nail in Chase's professional coffin. She asked me to explain the blockchain technology. I explained that it meant the record was un-erasable and could not be altered. She asked if an override was possible. I said no. I had designed it specifically to prevent managerial overrides that could endanger a patient. Then came the final beautiful move. "Dr. Hallstrom," Sharma said, her voice soft but carrying a sharp edge, "Vita Chain's current COO, Mr. Caldwell, has stated in depositions that your integrity seals were an example of, and I am quoting here, gold-plating the process. How would you respond to that?" I kept my eyes locked on Chase. I watched his world collapse in real time. "Mr. Caldwell also referred to my work as a science fair," I said calmly. He replaced my guarantee with a cheaper alternative in order to achieve what he called a cost-effective go-forward strategy. The result of that strategy is on the screen for everyone to see. He did not remove a feature. He broke a guarantee that a desperate family was relying on, a guarantee that a dying child needed him to keep. I had not raised my voice. I had not used a single adjective that was not purely descriptive. I had simply presented the facts. The jury was no longer looking at me. They were all looking at Chase Caldwell, and their faces were masks of pure contempt. He was undone, not by emotion, not by accusation, but by the cold, hard, unalterable data of a system he had dismissed as waste. The fallout was swift. The verdict was a formality. The jury found Vita Chain grossly negligent. The damages awarded were astronomical. It was a landmark judgment that did exactly what the billionaire wanted it to do. It utterly bankrupted the company. Chase Caldwell was not just fired. He was a pariah. His name became a cautionary tale in business schools, a synonym for the kind of catastrophic mismanagement that results from putting the bottom line above all else. A week after the verdict, the billionaire requested a meeting. We met not in a boardroom, but in a quiet library at his private foundation. He was a man hollowed out by grief, but with a new, terrible purpose. "You were right," he said. It was not an apology. It was a statement of fact. You built a perfect system and that fool broke it. I want to make sure that never happens again. He offered me the position of CEO at his new, heavily endowed nonprofit foundation. Its mission was simple: to create and implement a new global standard for medical logistics. He gave me a single directive: do it right. The Vita Chain bankruptcy auction was held in a cavernous warehouse on the industrial outskirts of the city. The air smelled of dust and failure. The company's assets were being sold for scrap: desks, chairs, servers, and a long, sad line of my Vitas Pods. I saw him there, Chase Caldwell. He was standing near the back, a ghost in a wrinkled suit. He was watching his career being itemized and sold off for pennies on the dollar. He looked lost. He saw me standing at the front, poised and calm, flanked by two lawyers from the foundation. The auctioneer began. Lot 27B, all intellectual property, patents, and trademarks related to the Vitas pod transportation system. He opened the bidding. I made the opening bid. It was low. Insultingly low. The auctioneer waited. Silence. He asked for another bid. More silence. "Sold," he finally said, banging his gavel, "to the Hallstrom Foundation." For less than the price of a new luxury car, I bought back my life's work. Our eyes met across the cavernous space. I saw shock in his, then comprehension, then finally the vacant look of a man who has lost everything. He was broken. I was absolute. I gave him a small, slow nod, a final acknowledgement, a final dismissal. The coup de grace was delivered a month later. It was not loud or vengeful. It was quiet. It was efficient. It was a press release. The Hallstrom Foundation issued its first public statement. We announced the new Hallstrom Integrity Standard for all critical medical shipments. It would be an open standard available to any company willing to meet its rigorous requirements. My first official act as CEO was to license the new, perfected Vitas Pod 2.0, complete with my original Integrity Seal design, to Vita Chain's largest former competitor. Their new marketing campaign was simple and brutal. The Hallstrom Seal. The only guarantee: they captured 100% of Vita Chain's old market share within 6 months. My old company was not just bankrupt, it was erased, forgotten, replaced by a better system, my system. My new office was clean and bright, with a view of the city. Bach was playing softly on the stereo. I was drinking smoky tea from a familiar chipped ceramic mug. My victory was not about changing the world. It was smaller, more personal, more satisfying. It was about competence crushing incompetence. It was about a promise kept. It was about vindication, earned one line of code at a time. I had not just gotten revenge, I had rewritten the rules of the entire game, and I had won.